Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Now, apart from damaging household appliances, load shedding is capable of inflicting more harm on South Africans. Higher stages of load shedding leaves fridges without power for up to 10 hours a day, compromising the condition of their contents. To chat about possible food poisoning that can be caused by fridges that are without power for extended periods, I am joined by food expert Professor Lucia Anelich. Thank you very much, Prof, for your time here on eNCA. I just thought to the team, because yesterday I was without power for about from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. and then again from 8 p.m. till midnight. And I just thought all the meat in my fridge, you know, the cold chain is going to break, and therefore it means I might have to throw it away, because won't I get sick from something like that?
Well, good afternoon to you and your viewers. That's a very good question. Generally speaking, if a fridge is kept closed without constant opening and closing for about 4 hours at a time, the food should keep. But this is provided that the fridge is actually running at about 4 degrees Celsius. And unfortunately, this is usually not the case in our households. Our fridges often run at higher temperatures. So that means that that 4 hours will probably be shrunk a little bit in terms of keeping the food safe and unspoiled.
So, Prof, what do we do then? Do we stop buying groceries in bulk or groceries for the week, and you buy as you buy the meat that you're going to use today, you buy today and you finish with it? Is that what we should do now?
That's, of course, one of the options. Things like UHT milk, sterilized milk, or even canned goods would hold or keep longer, because you don't have to keep those in the fridge until you open them, of course. Once they are opened, they are just as susceptible to spoilage like any other food in the fridge. But we must distinguish between spoilage and safety. When a food becomes unsafe, it is often you're not able to smell that it's unsafe, because it often doesn't have a bad smell. You cannot taste it. You cannot see any changes in the food. So typically one would eat it. And the pathogens, we call them pathogens, those are the organisms that can cause disease, will be at a higher level than what they should be, and then they can cause illness. Spoilage, on the other hand, is visible. You can smell it. It's a bad smell. You can see a color change. And so typically you wouldn't want to eat that food because you can see that it's spoiled. But in both cases, these load shedding intervals that we have are going to shorten the shelf life of those perishable foods in particular.
And you mentioned something important, because when the cold chain has been broken and your chicken or your steak has some bacteria, sometimes you don't see it because it doesn't look spoiled and it doesn't smell or hasn't changed color, etc. How sick can a person be from a cold chain being broken and bacteria that you cannot see in meat especially?
Absolutely. You can get foodborne illness like a salmonella infection or any other, depending on which of those disease-causing bacteria are present that are going to make you sick. Some of them produce toxins, some of them don't, but either way, if they are at high levels, you can get foodborne illness, typically vomiting, diarrhea sometimes you get a fever, sometimes you don't. And of course, the vulnerable sector of the population is always going to be more affected. And here, I mean very young children, the elderly, people over the age of 65, immunocompromised individuals, and the like. So those people are going to be more seriously affected.
So it's not a joke then when South Africans tweet and say load shedding and the power crisis is another pandemic.
Correct. It is definitely something that is going to affect every single one of us, and in some cases quite badly.
And I think maybe the worry, Prof, correct me if I'm wrong, is the poor. They don't necessarily have the luxury of saying, look, I'll park my car this week and not go out to go buy meat at Woolies or whatever, and I'll buy as I need today. They have to catch taxis. There's other things that they have to do to actually get to the stores. And even when they get to the stores, those stores are also going through their own load shedding schedule. And it might mean that we're all not safe anyway. But at the end of the day, like you mentioned, vulnerable people, I think the concern is also about the poor, right?
Absolutely. When you talk about vulnerable people, you also include those who are undernourished, of course, and this is often related to the poor. This is an incremental thing, unfortunately, because even if you travel in a taxi for an hour or two, you have a fresh product in your bag that is not going to be refrigerated for that period of time, plus the amount of time that there might have been a break in the cold chain at the retail store. So all of that just adds up. So when one gets home with that food, the first and best thing to do is to cook it completely and then consume it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, because you can't put it in the fridge when it's cooked anyway, because the fridge is going to be off for about 10 hours in a day. But Prof, what are the laws or rules around what supermarkets are supposed to do in terms of storage in their fridges? You know, we experienced or we saw some Woolies stores. I think there was one here in Johannesburg that was expressing how much meat they had to throw out because of the load shedding and the breakage of the cold cycle, right? So what is the rule around that? What should we be looking out for as the consumers when you buy the meat at these stores?
Well, there is a very good regulation in South Africa, and I'll give you the number, and you can find it on the Department of Health's website. It's R638. It's a basic food hygiene certificate that every single store and every single restaurant, anybody who deals with food and cooks food for the public must have such a certificate in place. And that means that an inspector has actually come to your premises and has inspected your premises according to that regulation. And in there, it has requirements for refrigeration and for freezing different foods and at the required temperatures that the Department of Health requires.
And it's going to be quite difficult because sometimes you go to the store, Prof, and I don't know if you've noticed some of the stores like your Pick n Pay or Woolies, for instance, will have meat that they've probably had on the shelves for about 2 days, and on the second day it's on sale, and that's usually, the packet that you might buy as, a consumer because you're trying to save money because it's a bit less. But now that there's 10 hours, 8 hours of load shedding a day, maybe we shouldn't buy the reduced meat that was packaged since the previous day?
Exactly. I wouldn't take that chance. I definitely would not do that. But very often, as I said, if it's spoiled or tending to become spoiled, you can actually look at it and see it. You can see that the bright red color of the meat is no longer there. It's starting to turn slightly brown. And I certainly wouldn't take and purchase those meats even at a discount because it does indicate a higher level of bacterial growth that has occurred in that product.
So we basically might be walking around with bacteria that we didn't even know about as South Africans as a result of load shedding. Prof, thank you very much for your time and for speaking to me today. We can only hope for a lower stage or lower stages of load shedding at the moment because we all know that, we can only expect reduction of the stages, but not necessarily that the load shedding would end. Professor Lucia Anelich, thank you very much for joining us.